Hey guys, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And I hope you enjoyed this interview. All right, welcome back to the program. My guest is joining me right now, Dr. Chikwe Ihekweazu, my friend. I haven't seen him in a while. The former DG of NCDC. He's currently Assistant DG, WHO Health Emergency Program. He's the author of a new book, An Imperfect Storm, A Pandemic and the Coming of Age of a Nigerian Institution, a memoir by himself, Dr. Chikwe Ihekweazu, with his wife, Vivian Ihekweazu. Doctor, good to see you. Welcome back.
Great, Nancy. Great to be on your show, and great to be back in Nigeria on a private visit home.
Yeah, I've known you for a while. I can't even think about how many years.
Before
you became a public health official, before you entered government, while you were in government. I remember the last interview we did was the series I did that week in 2021 when you and the former economic advisor to President Buhari was on. We did 1 year of COVID, what we had learned. That was the last interview that I had with you. So welcome back.
Thank you.
What is different now from home and abroad? Let me start that. Of course, you're in WHO now. What's different from when you were in Nigeria? You spent 5 years plus or so?
Yeah, 5 years in government, yes. You know, I think, Nancy, for me, the most important reflection is, a lot of us want so much for our country. Right now, we're going through a fairly difficult period with some demonstrations. It's a new government in power, just about a year. I think the thing is, having been in government for 5 years, I can bring back perspectives from my time in government, from my time now outside of government, advising governments around the world. So, because some of the expectations sometimes of people around the country, especially now, there's a lot of impatience in our developmental process, but also there's a lot of challenges in leadership in managing our big population. So I think the most important opportunity I have is perspective, having been both in government and now advising governments around the world in how to work. And, our work is definitely cut out for us moving forward.
Why did you write this book? Why did you write this book? Why the title, An Imperfect Storm? And your wife, of course, joined you to write this book. Why?
So I felt writing this book was a responsibility I had to Nigeria. Having worked at NCDC through this difficult period, worked very closely with our leaders in the country, going through this process, seeing the investments that we made in the organization for 3 years prior to the pandemic bear fruit without, of course, knowing that we're going to face a pandemic. Just the value of building institutions. And then having an institution that delivered a response that I hope Nigerians are proud of, was... So this book really was a labor of love, something I think we had to do. But let me end where you ended. This book would not have happened without Vivian's input, It's easy to say I want to write a book. But ultimately, this book started from every evening I get back home, sometimes 11, 12 p.m. She asked me, darling, how was your day? I would tell her. She would keep those notes. It was those notes that led to this book. So it was those initial notes of, because the stories were incredible. I'll come back and say, okay, this is what we did today. This was the lab, or this was the governor I spoke to, or this was National Assembly I went to, as there was pressure on us to deliver. So it was those notes that laid the foundation of what then became the book, An Imperfect Storm.
You sent this book to me on Monday. You will sign it before you leave, and I must say, Monday to night is how many days? This is the third day.
Yeah.
I had to read it, and I almost did not keep it. I was actually telling my husband, man, this is actually interesting. If you see, you could see places that I had, I even used my biro to underline a few places. So let's get into it. Let me start from where you got a phone call, as in, I think you went on a Christmas break. January 2020, there's COVID-19. How are you going to go about it? NCDC as a public health institution, you went there. There was really nothing on ground, You read it, you said in the book that when you entered there, you communicated with the staff of NCDC. Nobody was willing to talk. You're like, forget say I be DGO. Can you just talk to me? But even at that, people did not want to utter a word. So speak to me about that experience. Let's start from there. Then perhaps we can also take a few lessons as to preparedness for an outbreak. COVID-19 was 2020. Ebola was when again? Ebola was
15,
before
16, yes.
COVID. Now we're in a cholera outbreak. There are also some diseases. It's also been said that perhaps every 100 years there would always be a pandemic. In terms of preparedness, yeah.
So thanks, Nancy. I think I said somewhere in the book, preparedness is not a destination, it's a process. So when we started at NCC in 2016, so I'd had the incredible privilege of working in national public health agencies all my career. So when I came back and was appointed to NCC, and I asked the typical questions you would ask, where is this, where is that, who is there? And most of the things we needed were not in existence. So we didn't have a national reference lab, we didn't have an emergency operations center, we had no surveillance system to speak about. So in the 3 years prior to the pandemic was the years we spent building up. Of course, we didn't know it was coming, but we had several outbreaks. We had Lassa, we had meningitis in the Northwest, and each of those provided us an opportunity to build. And when you say build, what does it mean? Because, when people hear building, and it's not brick and mortar building, these are people, finding the right people, recruiting them, training them, enabling them the opportunity, building a supply chain of reagents, setting up, prior to the time we were sending data up to the national level on pieces of paper and on Excel sheets. So we had to build a digital infrastructure to report across our country. So those steps in building up are often not celebrated, they're done behind the scenes in our line of work. It's very hard to do things that, we don't build bridges or flyovers where people can come and cut ribbons. So you have to work behind the scenes very diligently and quietly, and that's what paid off. So January 2020, when those first rumors came that this was happening in China, we didn't need to think, what do I do? I knew I had a team in Abuja that knew what they needed to do. So I called, Olaolu, please set up an EOC, do X, Y, Z. I said, Mrs. Mba, let's get the lab ready. Let's start looking for. So a lot of the preparatory infrastructure, preparatory work was done in the years leading up to the pandemic. So 2020, our country was in a place that, I could tell Mr. President and the Minister, sir, we will do our best. We have a team that can lead this country through the response. And I hope we were able to do some of that.
As to, you also chronicled on the book how you got the notice that you were made chief executive officer, that you were in your pajamas or something like that, I think in Johannesburg. Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, that you've been made the CEO of NCDC. Now, this also leads me to, of course, there are pictures in the book. There's a place I saw a picture of. I was like, oh, really? Was this how NCDC was? Just like tables and chairs, nothing sophisticated and all of that. But it also brings me to the work you did at that time. And, the power of people. They say, is it a good thing makes dream work? How were you able to galvanize people to work with you? You also said in the book that you got a few volunteers, that some became staff of that place. Volunteers that were not even paid anything, went on to get jobs in other international NGOs. When there were openings at NCDC, I think one came back. Hey, what was his name? I can't remember his name now, but I read about him in the book. Came back and started working. One of your finest volunteers then. So speak to me about the power of people.
So Nancy, I think if there's one lesson I would really love people to take from this book is to find a belief in our country and what we have, right? Because for me, this is personal. This is also my own experience, right? I keep wondering if I didn't have the opportunity of exposure, of experience, some of it outside of the country, where would I have ended up? So what is important, when I came back to Nigeria in 2016, and met the colleagues I met at NCDC, I did not feel, I knew they were not prepared for the work we faced, but I did not feel that they had failed. I felt that the country had failed them, that they had not prepared them for the responsibilities that we had to have for the future. So the first few years were really about how do we get the right people, support their growth, inspire them, give them something to live for. No one had a job description, no one had a mission, no one really knew what to do. So we started off a very intentional process of setting out a strategy, convincing them they could do, building a leadership team, and that's really how the journey started. So when you hear, NCDC did X, Y, Z, these are the same Nigerians that you and I work with, that we complain about, that are not this, that are not. There's some people working in government. Everyone complains about public service in Nigeria. The people that responded to this pandemic were all public service. They were servants. There are challenges. There are challenges today with salaries, remuneration, facilities, but we could get them to work. When I came, no one had a laptop in the organization. How can an organization like ours do our work without the infrastructure? So there are things that we had to do first. We had to provide colleagues the tools with which to work. There are things I couldn't do. No head of a parastatal can increase salaries, so you have to manage somehow. But there's a lot that we can do to get the best out of people. But first, you have to give them something. And that's kind of the story of the organization.
And you lost people in the process. There was one that was heartbreaking for me, a lady and the driver that was killed, and you went to visit the family, and, so heartbreaking. That's actually when I read the book. When I saw it, I was, I also cringed. I could imagine and really condolences, because no one really comes back from the loss of a beloved one. So speak to me also about that, because a lot of things happen behind the scenes. Then the other thing I would like you to speak about is that when I read it in the book on Monday, I also tried to relate it to what's happening today in terms of protest. There was the NSAS protest, which you also mentioned, that the rioters and the rioters went to the NCDC medical warehouse to loot at the place, thinking that there are palliatives there, perhaps boxes of noodles and co. And there were just medical infrastructure there that if anything had happened to it, we would have just gone back to square one. And you got intervention from, I think, the military office of the National Security Advisor, but they couldn't stay there after like 3 days. They had to move. So speak to me about that, because see what's happening now, even in states across the country, whereby Minister Bosun of digital economy, they speak about how people went to loot a place that will be launched soon. So I could relate,
to those issues.
Yes, with what you were saying.
I think the 2 points you made are very important. When you lead a parastatal in Nigeria, and I took that responsibility very seriously, right? That everyone that worked for me, at the time I knew the name, first name, surname of every single staff in the organization. I wanted to understand their personal circumstance. So whether you're a driver, you're a cleaner, you're a director, and that's how we built a sense of mission around our work. So they knew I cared for them. So, the unfortunate incident as a colleague, in fact, 2 people were, 3 of them were in that vehicle. They went to distribute lab reagents in one of the states. On their way out back, they met an unfortunate incident. They were shot at. One of our colleagues lost his life. The driver was in hospital. So, and I had to go back to Owerri in Imo State and face the parents of that colleague. But I had to look the father in the eyes and tell him, your son died in the service of our country. This is what he did, and this is why we have to honor him. So, those things matter, and that personal relationship matters both on an individual and a collective level. And I think we built a great team spirit in NCC. We built a big family that supported each other throughout, which is also linked to the, the NSAS demonstrations, because I was caught in a difficult situation. Emotionally, I always understand why Nigerians are upset, because we want our country to work for us. Today, it was the same thing it was then. So the emotions that the country is not working and people go on the streets is a normal reaction You know, the challenge is when it turns violent, and this is a great example. You know, I was called late at night, and that the people calling were our own staff. Say, DG, they're attacking our warehouse, and people in the agency know how much. You know, these were not just commodities that we had bought as FGN. These were donations. From from corporate Nigeria, from our development partners. There were things that, you know, I had gone around soliciting support for the response. So to lose it would have been so incredibly sad. So we mobilized efforts. A lot of staff, our own staff, came out to convince the colleagues, the people agitating.
Right. You have to even tell them, come into the warehouse and see
we had to show them
that
these are PPEs. There's nothing you can do with these things. So, but those are, I think, just to conclude, those two examples just demonstrate the spectrum of responsibilities that you have leading a group in Nigeria. If I was doing this job somewhere else, I don't need to know the national security advisor or to be worried about colleagues getting shot. You know, I can focus on my core responsibilities, but you have bigger responsibilities in leadership in
one interesting thing for me too also in this book that you reflected was the challenges of navigating leadership. A specific example around, you know what I'm talking about, one of the directors of public health. So you couldn't do a presentation. Meanwhile, you are supposed to make the presentation. When I was reading that, I could also relate with you in terms of what is actually happening right now. Getting square pegs in square holes and round pegs in round holes in terms of, you know, the people that are supposed to do the job should do the job, and there should be support. You also referenced even support from sister agencies too in the book. How that leadership, how should we navigate it? Because you see a lot of people, even leaders, ego, Naomi Sabi said you supposed to you were also termed as an outsider here. You mentioned it in the book. So how do you navigate leadership? You are out now at the WHO, and it's all written in this book now, especially for those facing that kind of things. And you actually said that even till you left, you did not know what that frosty relationship was about with the lady in question, to show you that I read this your book.
Yeah, that's the thanks, you know, without going into specifics, because I really want people to read the book. I think there's some structural challenges we have, and we all know what they are. You know, in our country, we create parastatals every day, right? And when we create a parastatal to do a job, the minute it's for a purpose, because that job is not being done by ministries are set up to supervise so when you set up a parastatal, any parastatal in any sector, it's very hard for the mother ministry sometimes to let go of that role and let the parastatal run with it. And that's why we have parastatals all over the place and conflicting. The health ministry, which I know the best, we have a parastatal for HIV, we have a department for HIV. In the same ministry. That can make many other examples similar. So when Mr. President makes an announcement that he wants to implement a Rasaya report, I'm not surprised 6 months later,
nothing is happening.
No one has heard the outcome, because to merge these parastatals, it is hard. So we have real structural challenges, and this is something we have to address collectively. It's not limited to the health sector, finance sector, any other sector, you find the same problem. The difference in health is we think we can get over it. You know, in the defense services, last example, you know, you don't create an army and then you ask the Ministry of Health to go and fight the war. The army does the fighting, the ministry does policy. Finance, your area. The Ministry of Finance doesn't manage your financial interactions in the country. It's done by the CBN, right? The Central Bank of Nigeria has its role, the ministry has its role. But in the Ministry of Health, you have the ministry very often, and it's several parastatals, all trying to do the same thing. So we have to let the parastatals, whatever parastatal it is, do what they were set up to do. And the ministry supervises. And that's kind of one of the conflicts I refer to.
So when the launch of the book, I know, is tomorrow. Tomorrow, how can Nigerians get it? And you put stuff in the book. Nigerians are not good readers. I don't know if it has started improving. A lot of us do read audio books. Is there a way they can read audio, and perhaps where can they get this, and how much? If, if you
the
want
two
to
things.
disclose, yes.
This book is published by Masobe Books, and
Okay.
Masobe is very important because the publishing industry is really a difficult space at the moment. Forex is not unassociated with it, so I'm very proud to have a Nigerian publisher. He'll be in bookshops all over the country from tomorrow. But really, what I want out of this book, the price point, I have no impact on it, but I really want this to spark a conversation on public sector leadership. I think in the private sector, there are enough incentives to drive people up the cadre to lead private sector organizations. To get this country to work, we need to get the right people into the public sector. And right now, it won't be any surprise to you that it's very hard to incentivize people to join the public sector.
Do you still have hope? Are you optimistic about institutions, public institutions?
Nancy, you know, I'm
because
always...
there are so many lessons, even the stuff that people did. I know that COVID, God bless his memory now, Herbert Wingwe, which I interviewed at that time, they did a lot. They donated a lot of equipment. Only God knows where those things are now. But
you know, Nancy, what gives me hope yesterday, today, and into the future as Nigerians, you know, we underestimate what we have. You know, I have lived all over the world. Today I work with WHO. I know even my Nigerian colleagues working in WHO,
yeah.
they're always overperforming. We always overdeliver. We have to ask ourselves, what is in it? What is it in Nigeria, in the structures, institutions,
that doesn't make
that
us deliver.
deprives us from that opportunity to deliver?
Okay.
This is my question for all of us as a country to work on.
So I think we'll leave it at that. An imperfect storm, a pandemic and the coming of age of a Nigerian institution, a memoir by Dr. Chikwe Ihekweazu and his wife, Vivian Ihekweazu. I salute you, madam. You know, it takes two to tango. So wherever you are, well done. Doctor, before we go, okay. So
no, thanks a lot. There's many lessons in this as we build our country. I don't have all the answers, but I just offer my perspectives. I look forward to having any others. I look forward to comments, your feedback, and conversations the book will trigger.
Okay,
Nancy.
you signed
Thank
this.
you very
Signed
much.
this
Absolutely, I'll sign this for you.
This for me. So, all right, as we end the show, that's the much we can take on today's edition of the program. Lessons for our public institutions, not just health. Dr. Chikwe Ihekweazu is the Assistant Director General, WHO Health Emergencies Program, former DG at the NCDC. Thank you all. I'll see you all again tomorrow. Be the best you can be and be the change that you want to see. I am Nancy. Thank you for watching. In case this is your first time watching us, thank you. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, drop your comments as well as like, and most of all, share our content.